Good morning. On this 16th week of Ordinary Time, Thursday, the Feast of St. Mary Magdalene. We've listened many times to the Gospels of the Resurrection and the stories of the risen Jesus, his first appearances during these days. All accounts have something special of their own. Still, in all of them, 2 points appear and are, in a small way, the golden thread that unites them all. First, Mary of Magdala is the first person to whom the risen Lord appears. Second, Jesus sending out the incredulous disciples to Galilee and to all people of all nations. These are 2 essential points of gospel narration regarding the resurrection. There may be additions or changes, but these 2 points are present in all, one way or another. The gospel just proclaimed is that of Mark, who is somewhat concise. The passage actually summarizes the resurrection stories of John the Evangelist. The first apparition to Magdalene is not an insignificant detail. It is instead an important detail of the evangelical announcement. Why does Jesus appear first to Mary of Magdala? At the beginning of the Gospel, we have a woman, the Virgin Mary. At the end of the Gospel, there is another woman, Mary of Magdala. In the beginning, there is a sinless woman who consents and accepts to become the mother of the Lord and welcomes him in her womb, beginning the history of redemption. At the end of the Gospel, a pure though deeply afflicted woman who, in gratitude for being released from her 7 demons, follows and supports the Lord from her earthly wealth. The early fathers of the Church, especially Bede the Venerable, take this approach further to include Eve, a woman who first tasted death, but in Mary of Magdala, a woman who first saw the resurrection and witnessed eternal life. This is to testify the woman does not carry the guilt of the transgressions among men in perpetuity. With the passion and death of Jesus, the disciples lost faith, except for Mary, Mother of the Lord. Mary of Magdala, therefore, is the one through whom God, through her encounter with the risen, reconnects with the men. She becomes the messenger to men of the resurrection. She is the symbol of the unfaithful bride that God calls back to intimacy. In the Old Testament, there are many images through which God calls to himself and forgives the unfaithful bride. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, speaking of the infidelity of the bride, but also God's forgiveness. The announcement to Mary of Magdala is the announcement of forgiveness to unfaithful mankind, to men who, once again, with the crucifixion of Christ, said no to God and went off and hid. Mary of Magdala was possessed by 7 demons. 7 is a symbolic number and indicates fullness. In other words, Mary of Magdala was truly immersed in sin. We don't know what kind of sin, but sin had become a constitutive part of her life. But her encounter with the Lord freed her, forgave her, saved her. She represents, in short, the mother of sinful and forgiven humanity. That is the reason for the appearance of Mary Magdala. We cannot be represented by the Virgin Mary because she has always remained faithful. She is without sin. Mary of Magdala is therefore the one who represents us. On the cross, the mother of the Lord becomes our mother, while after the resurrection, Mary of Magdala is the one who introduces us to the encounter with the risen one and exemplifies our access to forgiveness. The alliance of God with mankind is restored in the meeting of Jesus with Mary of Magdala. With Magdalene we cry out, "My soul is thirsting for you, O Lord my God." She is an image of the church that early fathers of the church called Casta Meretrix, saint and sinner, is represented by Mary of Magdala. The Virgin Mary is a mother of the church and our mother. On the other hand, Mary of Magdala is a figure of the church which is composed of sinners, but is at the same time reconciled with the Father through the presence of the risen Christ. The risen one, encountering Mary of Magdala, meets the unfaithful but forgiven bride, sinful humanity but in need of mercy. She reconnects the bond in the presence of the risen Christ, the bond with the disciples who have broken with the crucifixion and death of Jesus. The apostles' difficulty believing in the resurrection needs witnesses in the same league, witnesses who are like them, like Mary of Magdala. The Magdalene is the woman who holds in her heart the desire for Jesus and searches for him alone. The two disciples found the tomb empty. They returned home, while Mary of Magdala, remained in the garden, still searching for the Lord. She didn't give herself peace. She didn't give up. Her insistence on seeking the Lord was repaid by the encounter with him, who then called her by name. Jesus is the first found by the one who has her heart turned in search of him. He did not go first to the incredulous disciples, but to Mary of Magdala, who was in search of his body, considered lost. In the gospel, we see first of all with the heart, an open heart, and then with the eyes. The eyes recognize what the heart has already welcomed. Mary of Magdala is our witness to faith. The invitation to become witnesses is addressed to all believers. We, forgiven sinners, are all called to become witnesses to the resurrection of Christ. In short, the path is clear, and Mary of Magdala expressly indicates it to us, to recognize ourselves as sinners, meet Christ, and allow oneself to be forgiven by him, love him, recognize him alive in us, testify. If we do not recognize ourselves as sinners, we do not need Christ and the forgiveness of God, to which he alone gives us access. We can't even love him because we don't feel the need for him. He's a presence that doesn't communicate anything to us. And so we have nothing to witness except ourselves. But if we recognize we are sinners and allow him with humility to forgive us, we will have access to his love, to his life that will break into us, and alone will become an announcement. Let us ask ourselves how much Mary of Magdala represents us, is our figure. Do we recognize ourselves among the forgiven sinners? Does our life explode with joy for salvation we have experienced? Do our hearts burn with a desire to meet Christ? Or are we not rather like the disciples of the gospel, closed up in the cenacle, in mourning and crying? Have a blessed and glorious week, O you followers of Magdala.